Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Mr. Chris Ducker is in the house. Chris is speaker, author, entrepreneur extraordinaire, and hails from Cambridge, England. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's good to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So you may or may not know this, but I first came across you through the Pat Flynn Smart Passive Income podcast.
Okay.
Probably 10-ish years ago.
Yeah. Well, Pat and I have been good friends for, 15 years now, something like that. He's actually my youngest's godfather. So we're very, very close, both our families. So, yeah.
Very cool. I didn't know that. So since then, I've had some other names that I've learned from Pat Flynn come on the show, like Shane Sams and Cliff Ravenscraft, to name a few. And it's kind of crazy how that's all come full circle. I was listening to you for many years now, I have my own podcast, and it's great to have you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's great to be here. I appreciate it.
So you have a great journey, Chris, and that's where I like to start. Is I want to hear, and I know a little bit about it because I've followed your content and you for quite some time. Tell our listeners about your story and how you got to where you are now.
Man, how long you got?
Plenty of time.
It's been quite a journey. I mean, really, I've been an entrepreneur for almost 22 years. Really, kind of from a background of sales and marketing, that's been my kind of career path from the age of about 17. My first sales job. In the year 2000, I took a real gamble. I left a very, 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 very strong position with a publishing company here in the UK to go out and work with an international bank over in the Philippines. And we were involved in the kind of local personal loan, credit card facilitation, that kind of thing locally. And I was managing a workforce over there of a couple of hundred people. And then about 2-3 years in, I broke contract and set up my own consultancy. Continued to do something similar for a while before we morphed it into a full-blown outsourcing business process company. That kind of is where we get to around sort of 2004, 5, 6-ish. And we started to get very, very serious about the business growth and the scalability side of things. Built that business up, hit our first mill in the first couple of years, ended up selling that company actually last year after all those years, which was great. It was a bittersweet exit, but nonetheless a financially rewarding one, which I'm not moaning about. But prior to, in the middle of all of that as well, I started Virtual Staff Finder in 2010, which is still in operation now, which is a VA recruiting company. I started Youpreneur 9 years ago, almost at 10 years for that company now, which is a personal brand expert business education company. I invest, I advise, I sit on boards, I speak, I write books. Third book coming out next year. That's it. That's it in a nutshell, so to speak. There you go.
So what was the business that you had sold recently?
So that was the call center business. So we had about 450 or so employees, 16-year-old business, working mostly with corporations in the United States, UK, Australia, a little bit in Europe, but not much. And that business, I'd not actually been involved in running it day to day and since probably about 2014, 2015. So it's been a good while I'd been out of that business. I was a true owner. I wasn't an operator anymore and had people running it for me day to day. And that was kind of like around the same time that we started Youpreneur, which a lot of people know me for online, obviously. And it was kind of weird at first because at first I really loved the idea of like building a huge company. We had like three floors in a 4-story building that we took, hundreds of employees, great clients, traveling around the world, business meetings, everything was great. But I soon became pretty tired of it, if I'm to be really honest with you. And it wasn't until around 2008-9 when I first met Pat and a few other folks that are, still in the online game now. Amy Porterfield, John Lee Dumas, these kind of guys. We always call ourselves kind of the original OG kind of crew because we all started and came up at the same time. Yeah. what's nice about that is when I look back on those early days of hanging out with people like Pat, John, and Amy, and everyone else, to see us all now flourishing the way that we have, for the most part, just goes to show you good people find good people. Good people hang out with good people. And in the internet game, where there are not so good people hanging around as well, it's nice to know that if you gravitate towards the right people, they can lift you up and they can help you achieve great things. And we've certainly all supported each other over the years with speaking careers. And I remember a time actually with Pat, and he won't mind me telling me this story because we talked about it on his show. But we were in LA, both speaking at an event together, and I get a knock on my hotel door about 1 a.m. and it's Pat, and he's in full speaking regalia, right? Full blown tie, jacket, the whole thing. It's like 1 a.m. So what are you doing? He said, I need you to come to my room now. I need to do a complete run through so you can let me know what you think of my presentation. I said, dude, it's 1 o'clock. Like, you for real? It's 1 a.m. Oh yeah, you got to help me. So I go into the room. He's set up, man. He's got the laptop. He's got the clicker in his hand. He's going through the whole thing. And I did. I sat down and I at 1 a.m. I went through the entire presentation with him, and he did great. And the next day he crushed it. But the fact of the matter is, that's the level of support I think that entrepreneurs really need to be able to grow and scale in the right way. And it's been great over the years. But yeah, it was bittersweet. To go back to your original question, it was bittersweet last year because on one hand, I was saying goodbye to part of my legacy, which I'd obviously worked very, very hard to build up over that period of time. Not to mention an incredible team of, employees and management. But on the other hand, it was a huge relief to a certain degree. When you're responsible for 400 plus people as an employer, particularly when you're not living in the country anymore, because we moved to the UK in 2018. It was a relief at the same time. And so, yeah, bittersweet exit, more sweet. But
so Chris, it's not very often you talk to entrepreneurs who, when they leave the corporate world, their first venture is a massive success that leads to an exit.
Yeah.
How did you, and looking back now, how did you amass that amount of success so quickly and in your first venture?
I put it down to one single discussion, one conversation that I had, and it was at a dinner party at a friend's house in the Philippines. And there was about 12 of us at this long rectangle table. And I was sat right opposite this middle-aged American gentleman who I'd never met before. His name is Tom. We are now good friends and still friends after all these years. I believe this was probably 20, if I had to put a date on it, probably about 2009, give or take, right? And this guy was a very, very successful entrepreneur, multi-million-dollar annual revenue. He was in the corporate awards business, and was extremely, extremely successful. Probably the most successful guy at the table that evening. And there was a lot of ballers around that table that night. And I was just like, what am I doing here? And I knew why I was there. I used to hang out with, I used to shoot hoops with the guy who was hosting it. That's how I got at the table. We used to play one-on-one together every weekend. Whereas everybody else around the table already had these like really successful businesses and everything. And Tom said to me, I asked him, we got chatting over the night, and towards the end of the evening, I said to him, Tom, we just started this company, a couple of years ago. We're just now really starting to take it very, very seriously. We're going all out on the international side of things. We're not focused on the local businesses anymore. What do I need to do? This is my question. What do I need to do to get what you've got 10 years from now? Lay it on me. I'll do it. Whatever you say to do, I'll do it. And he said, oh, it's very easy, Chris. Like, it's super easy.
Okay.
All you got to do is work 14-hour days, 7 days a week for the next 5 years. That's what I did. In the first 5 years of building my business, that's what I did. And I was like, well, okay, it sounds simple, but it sounds horrific at the same time. Like, nobody wants to do that. And I said to him, well, yeah, but surely like nowadays, you've been in the game for 20, 25 years or whatever it was at the time. Like, surely nowadays it doesn't need to be as hard work as it was. Those, we've got software and applications and freelancers and VAs and, all this sort of stuff. Like, surely we can do it faster now, right? Surely. And he was like, no, because you need to be in there. You need to be in the business. You need to learn everybody's job. You need to be ready to step in whenever you need to step in, and so on and so on and so on. And I took that piece of advice. I didn't work 14, 15-hour days for 5 years in a row, but what I did take away from that was that, and based on the name of your show and what you're all about and who you serve, I know you're going to love this. What I took away from that, and I didn't really take away from it like word for word, but now retrospectively, I can look back at it. I knew that I needed to hustle. I knew I needed to put my foot down on the gas or pull back on the throttle, whatever analogy you want to use, for a period of time, which would allow me to be discoverable, have discussions with the right people, sign the right clients, hire the right team members. I knew I was going to have to really work hard for a good 3-4 years in order to establish what we needed to establish. And I'm not a big believer in luck in business. I believe you create your own luck to a certain degree, but we were a little lucky. About 9 months later, we got an incoming lead. There was a small company based out of Europe that were looking to outsource all of their customer service. They were in the homeware business, and they had happened to be in town. They were already in town. They were visiting call centers, and they went to 3 or 4 places, didn't like what they saw. They called us the day before they were due to fly out, said, "We only just discovered your company. We know you're on the way to the airport. Can we swing by on the way to the airport and come and visit you?" Sure. So they turn up and they walk out. We've got 25. We would sell our business on seats, or employees on seats. We had a 25-seat contract, handshake right there and then before they left. Paperwork was signed a few days later. And by the end of that year, they had 85 employees with us. And that was what really lifted us up through the ranks quite quickly. But hey, I had to work hard to get there. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I love that. So you said hard work. Now, we talked about hustle and how we're on the same page with that before the show.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that mean? Because I think the word hard work, or the phrase hard work, can mean a lot of different things to different people. A lot of people think they put in 60 hours a week, but they don't. Or a lot of people think they're grinding or hustling, name any word you want, but maybe they don't. So what is hard work to you, or what was it when you were putting in that time for those 3 to 5 years?
I mean, hard work to me now is completely different compared to what it was all those years ago, right?
I
So
bet.
you asked about all those years ago. I'll answer it in that regards. It was about doing longer hours than I would have wanted to have done. I guess I was probably working on average maybe of 5 to 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. So it was putting in the hours, but it wasn't as if I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I was actively cold calling to find business. I was actively training employees to find the right team members. I was actively working with IT to make sure our infrastructure was as solid as a rock and we wouldn't have downtime. If you have downtime in the call center industry or the BPO industry, it means you don't get paid, plain and simple. It's like a car with no gas in it. It ain't going to go nowhere. So, whether it was, finding, power generators to be installed, to back up ISPs, to, all these other things, like it was a full on thing, man, because we were very much in the midst of a bit of a boom in that country for that industry at the time. It probably was a little easier to achieve everything we needed to achieve at that point than it would have been maybe 3 or 4 years earlier or 5 or 6 years later. Because 5 or 6 years later, it became almost impossible to keep people under your roof as employees for any longer than a year, because they would just hop from one facility to another because people were so desperate for staff. They would just throw stupid salary advances at people. And, "Oh, you've been at Chris Ducker's company for a year? Sure, no problem. Come over here. We'll give you, 30% more," that kind of thing. So it was pretty brutal
Wow.
6, 7 years into it. So yeah, looking back on it, it was longer hours. It was certainly, a certain amount of sacrifice. We just got married, just had our first kid with my second wife. And, it was sacrifice, man. But I also knew that this was the shot. Like, this was the shot. There wasn't going to be another shot that could ultimately get me up to to the level I wanted to be at anytime soon. So it was very much a matter of kind of making hay when the sun was shining as well.
So, in that process, were you operating your business with a strategy, with a real game plan?
Um, it's a good question.
Like,
I
did
mean,
you
I
have a
guess,
strategy that you operated from?
yeah, I mean, the strategy was sign as many clients as we can.
So, not really.
Well, we're bootstrapping, man. You know, and by the way, my entire career, I've never borrowed a single cent. I don't owe a single cent to anyone. I'm not in debt in any way, shape, or form, and it's always been like that since day
I love
one.
that.
So everything we've made has always been put back into the business, right? So no, it wasn't kind of fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing, but it was do what you need to do to get the business, sign the client at all costs, and then we'll figure out how to staff that client campaign after you've got the contract and the deposit kind of thing.
I love it.
And yeah, I mean, we hustle hard, man. We worked hard,
It sounds like it. Well, the
Yeah.
reason I ask about strategy is this. I'll give you a little context, and people listen to the show have probably heard me talk about strategy a lot. But I grew up in a small business. I have a lot of friends and family in small business. And the one thing I found was a lot of them will chase their goals in perpetuity. They always they're stuck in the hamster wheel, always end up coming up short. And I like to ask questions to find out what the root cause is. I'm kind of like a root cause guy. And to me, it always comes back to strategy. So many entrepreneurs are stuck
Oh
because
yeah.
they don't have a game plan. Now they say they have, oh, my game plan is to sell more and to do this. But if you don't have it in documented form, you don't really have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, how do you know what you need to do? How do you know what success looks like? And on and on. In my opinion, that is the number one reason why so many entrepreneurs just are chasing their tail in perpetuity. Is that fair?
Yeah. I would say it's totally fair. I would caveat that by saying though that certainly based on the people that I work with, and I coach and mentor many entrepreneurs, I don't think many of the people that I've coached actually have gone into their businesses with a plan in place per se. But I think that, you know, they realize that if they really want to scale and go further, faster, then you need to get a plan in place in order to be able to do that. What that plan looks like will differ from one person to another. I mean, I work with a lot of personal brand entrepreneurs, so people like coaches, consultants, speakers, authors, that kind of thing. And that type of business owner is probably going to work slightly differently to a SaaS business owner or to a service based, or product based, e-commerce based business owner. But ultimately, I would say you're 100% right. If you want to scale, if you want to grow, a plan is inevitable.
Yeah, I think so. But I've been guilty of it, so I've lived both sides of it now, and
Yeah, you and me both.
I can appreciate that.
You and me both.
So, Chris, getting back to your journey, it's a very interesting one. You now have your hands in a lot of different cookie jars. So, how do you manage your time and your focus? Because, I mean, it's hard just for me as an entrepreneur to do two or three things and balance that throughout my week, in addition to having a family and trying to be a good husband and a good dad and just a good friend and et cetera, et cetera.
It all comes down to priorities, right? That's really what it will always come down to. And I see a lot of people that are in our position who are husbands and fathers. I got 4 kids. 2 of them are adults now, but they're still kids. I still want to be with them. I still want to hang out with them. And I'm very blessed to have a great bunch of friends as well. A wife that understands and supports me, but also, wants to spend time in me too. So the priorities in my life come in 3 different shapes. Number 1, the first priority is me, first and foremost, because if I can't take care of myself, I can't take care of nobody else. And I've learned this the hard way. I've burnt out. I suffered with phase 3 adrenal fatigue. I had major back surgery 10 odd years ago as a result of burnout and crushing my back sitting in a chair for too long, back in the good old days.
Mhm.
So number 1 is me. I got to eat right. I got to move my body every day. I got to make sure I hydrate properly every day. I pretty much don't drink that much alcohol anymore. I might have the odd glass of wine, the odd scotch every now and then, but other than that, I don't drink alcohol all that much at all. I'm a fit and healthy dude at the age of 51, and I feel good. And, you know, a lot of that comes down to, you know, the usual diet, rest, sleep, that kind of stuff. But also, I'm a big proponent of, and I don't like to use the word biohacking, but I will say health optimization. So I cold
That's
plunge
a good one.
regularly, I red light daily. I've got a full body red light therapy chamber that, I mean, it's been a game changer for me personally in terms of inflammation, energy levels, aches, pains, all that kind of stuff. I sauna 4 times a week, you know, so all these other little bits that I do to kind of like keep the main thing, if that makes sense. Right after that is my family. So that's, you know, and that's not just a single unit. That's also made up of individual units, right? So you've got, you know, the part of that unit with my partner, with my wife, and then the other part with my kids, but also individual units within those, that bracket of kids as well, because each kid wants different things, needs different things, but collectively, family is number two, and then the third one is business. And I think where a lot of entrepreneurs go wrong is they kind of get that ass backwards to a certain degree. They focus on the business stuff too much, and they don't focus enough on themselves, and they're not spending enough time with their family. And as I've gotten older, particularly in the last 5 to 6 years, and boy, boy, did the pandemic wake all of us up when it comes to real priorities and what's important in life, right? Like the last 5 years have been more life changing for me than any other 5 year period in my entire career, in my life, period, actually. And so, yeah, those are the three priorities. And for me, that, you know, they're non negotiables. That's the way I work.
So do you have those documented? Do you have those somewhere written down, that's the thing you
They're
look
not,
at and you remind yourself of?
no, they're not documented, but they're on my schedule every day. They're on my schedule every day.
Okay.
So, you know, I don't start work until 10 o'clock in the morning. So prior to work, it's me time. So whether it's spending time exercising or resting or reading or sauntering or plunging and all those other crazy things that I do, prior to 10, I don't work at all. And after 4, I don't work at all either. So you right now, you're my last call of the day. We started at 3 p.m. UK time. And the reason why is because my kids come back from school just after 4 p.m. So I want to be fully present for when they come back as well. During the daytime, I make sure I eat properly, I rest properly as well. So I'm only actually working like 5 hours a week, 5 hours a day rather, on average. And I only work 4 days a week. I haven't worked a Friday for 8 years, and I haven't worked in August for 8 years. 8 years is our annual sabbatical as a family. And so it's on the schedule. It's not written down. I don't have SOPs or anything like that, but it's on the schedule. It's clear. You know, a good friend and mentor of mine, Michael Hyatt, said many, many years ago, if it doesn't get scheduled, it doesn't get done. And I'm 100% in agreement with that. And that's why
Yeah.
every single thing goes on the schedule.
Yeah, and if you don't know Michael Hyatt, you should look him up and get his full focus planner because it could be the game changer. And one of the reasons I bring that up because I would tell my wife for years, you know, I always said that I was forgetful on things. And it was partially was because I wasn't taking care of myself. Number one wasn't the priority. Me wasn't a priority. So health, sleep, exercise, diet, etc.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
didn't realize even in my 30s that that could impact me the way it did. Turns out it did.
Yeah.
And then I started to get priorities by using a daily planner, like the full focus planner. And it kept my priorities and my goals in front of me. So I couldn't say out of sight, out of mind. And that's why I say to a lot of other entrepreneurs, you got to write this stuff down. You got to keep it in front of you. And you're reminded every day what your priorities are. And if it's a priority, it'll be on your calendar. And if it's not, it won't, in the simplest form.
Yeah. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
So Chris, you got a lot of stuff going on right now. Where's your full focus at the moment?
My main business focus is my roundtable mastermind, and it has been like that for the last couple of years or so. So my roundtable is made up a maximum of 50 people at any one time. We have 2 different levels. We have a gold level and a platinum level based on what part of the journey you're on. And platinum folks get one-on-one access to me. Gold folks don't, but they still get access to a certain degree in a number of different ways. And that the reason why that's my focus is because I've prioritized it to become my focus. So Upreneur, which like I say is about to celebrate 10 years next year, is now actually operated day to day by my eldest daughter, my 27-year-old, and she's our COO for that company. And so she handles all of our courses, our group coaching cohorts, and things like that throughout the course of the year. But really, my main focus, business day to day, is facilitating and serving the clients within the Roundtable Masterminds. And that probably, I would say, takes up about 70% of my work week in one way, shape, or form, whether I'm on calls or on WhatsApp. My platinum members get one-on-one access to me, all year round on WhatsApp. And maybe I'm, at live events or I'm speaking and that sort of thing. But generally, that takes up the vast majority of what I'm doing.
So at some point, I'd love to have you back and talk exclusively about masterminds, because it's a subject that comes up a lot with individuals we talk to,
Yeah.
whether it be wanting to have their own mastermind or join one. And there's a lot of variations of what a mastermind looks like, good, bad, or indifferent.
Oh, yeah.
But I would love to hear from your perspective. What is the benefit, and what does a traditional mastermind look like?
Man, I can quintessentially say, hand on heart, there's no way in the world I would be where I am now in terms of level of success were it not for mastermind groups and coaches and mentors. I reckon I've probably invested upwards of $500,000 in the last 10 years in those programs, working with coaches, with the right mentors, being at the right events, so on and so on. And the reason why is because it works. It works better than any course you can ever take. It can work better than any book that you can ever read or any event that you ever attend. And I just feel like there is an incredible force behind getting yourself into a group or working with the right coach or mentor who understands the journey that you're on and can facilitate you making the right moves and avoiding the wrong moves. And generally, putting pedal to metal, so to speak, right? Because for me personally, I can genuinely say to you, all the big breakthroughs I've had in the last decade have come about from masterminds and coaches. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And I can't put into words just how very important they've been to me in my life and my growth as an entrepreneur. It's been a complete and utter game changer. And it's the reason why I'm still a part of a mastermind myself. I pay for monthly. I still work with 2 individual coaches at varying times throughout the course of the year. They're both transactional relationships. I have one mentor that is not a transactional relationship. We're just friends, but he happens to be an older gentleman and he takes care of me in certain ways. And I also run my own mastermind group as well. So I'm all in on mastermind, man. It's a big, big part of my world and what I'm all about.
Do you have a story you could share with us? Because you mentioned there were several breakthroughs in your entrepreneurial career. I'd love to hear one if you have the ability to share.
Yeah, sure. Actually, let me think. Okay, so this one's a little bittersweet, and it's a little fresh as well. Probably the most important mentor or coach I've had in my life was a gentleman named Dan Miller. And Dan was famous for his New York Times bestselling book, 48 Days to the Work You Love, and a host of other things. I mean, he was friends with Dave Ramsey and Michael Hyatt and a host of other folks throughout the course of his career. Dan passed away at the beginning of the year. I spoke to him for the last time in December, just before Christmas. From what I understand, I was one of maybe 10 people to speak to him in the month or two prior to his death. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We were sitting around his kitchen table in Nashville. And this must have been about 2016, I think, give or take. And I was telling him about how unhappy I was living in the Philippines. At this point, I'd been in the Philippines for 16 years. It was a long, long time for any expat to be in that environment. And I didn't have a peer group locally. I felt like I'd kind of plateaued from a business perspective. Business wasn't growing anymore. We had all these other things going on that were doing well. And but I just didn't feel happy. I wasn't happy being there with my family. There was very little to do culture wise, museums, theaters, all that kind of stuff. Nothing, right? And in typical Dan fashion, he came out with one line and he just said, "So move. You're not a tree. You're not rooted there." And I was like, oh my gosh, he's so right. And that actually brought about the decision to leave the Philippines. That was the summer of 2016. And we left just after the summer of 2018. So 2 years later. And obviously we had to buy a house and get visas and all the other sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, not long after that discussion, my wife and I had the discussion that led to us moving over here. And that, although it's not necessarily business related, business and life, the whole kind of work-life balance thing is a complete myth. Our business life will integrate with our personal life and vice versa. And that was probably one of the most important integral parts of or bits of feedback or coaching I've ever received. Dan.
That's fantastic. I love those stories. That to some people they hear that and be like, "Well, how come you didn't think of that, Chris?" Well,
right. Well, yeah.
Sometimes you need someone to tell you
those
yes.
things. Absolutely.
So, Chris, I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone who's been through a mastermind who said they didn't like it or didn't find value. However, I've talked to a lot of people that I've suggested it, or it's, hey, should I do this? But they're so apprehensive. Why do you think people are apprehensive to do that?
I think, I don't think I know. It usually comes down to two things. Number one, money or the lack thereof. Because generally there are two types of masterminds which are transactional. They're either really good masterminds or really bad masterminds. There's no messy middle. And the bad masterminds are generally the cheaper masterminds to join, right? A couple of $100 a month or whatever price tag you want to put on it. Every decent mastermind that I've been part of has been an investment, like a genuine investment, upwards of $1,500 a month plus, right? So I think the most I've ever spent on a year for a single mastermind, including flights and accommodation for a few different retreats and things like that. I think I dropped like $45K 1 year on a single mastermind. But 45K, you can make that in a week, launching something amazing to serve your people, right? So it's all relevant. But yeah, they're either, I think number one is money. Number two is fear of commitment, fear of failure, fear of not showing up for themselves first and foremost, because you'd be amazed. I remember I read a stat years ago that something like 47% of all online courses that are purchased never even started by the people that buy them.
Wow.
They never even take the first lesson. So, and I think the commitment to join a mastermind group is more than just financial and potential headspace bandwidth wise, right? But it's time as well. Like you're going to have monthly calls, probably. You're going to have in-person meetings 2, 3, 4 times a year, whatever. For our roundtable guys, we meet twice a year. We have a 3-day event, and it's an event. It's not just like a little get together. Like we pull out all the stops, right? And we do that twice a year, once in the UK, once in the United States, because we have members in both countries, pretty much split down the middle. And ultimately, it's a time commitment as well as a financial one and a mental bandwidth one as well. And I think they're the two main reasons why people just don't pull the trigger, quite frankly.
So if I'm translating correctly, one needs to have an abundance mindset. Like you need to believe that you're capable of that $45,000 month, right? You need to get over the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, or any other fear that might come up. Is that right?
I mean, I think I don't know whether you need to put like a dollar amount on it, but I feel like I know the people who join a mastermind who are genuinely open-minded and coachable, they will be the ones, and obviously who take action, they will be the ones that get the most out of it. It's not like NASA science. Like it's not hard to work that out. And I think that if you come to the table with that abundance mindset of, I don't have all the answers, nobody's got a monopoly on good ideas. Hello, I'm here. I need help. Or possibly, hello, I'm here. Can I have my permission slip now, please? As long as you rock up to the table with that kind of mindset and you're comfortable with the financial investment that goes along with it, I think you're going to do just fine out of it. And generally, I mean, although it doesn't happen that much anymore today, when if I kind of roll back the tape a little bit, 5, 6, 7 years down, in the past, I would get people that would join my mastermind and they wouldn't do the work. And I would let them stay in the mastermind. I'm getting paid. If they don't want to do the work, it's their problem kind of mindset, right? I have shifted entirely away from that mindset now. Number one, I don't necessarily really need the money that badly anymore. But more importantly, if you join the mastermind and you ask for my opinion and you ask the opinion of your peers in the group and you don't take action on that stuff, more fool you and bye-bye. Bye-bye. I will actively now, cull the membership numbers because it's maxed at 50, and I will cull people from the group if they're not, if they're 6 months into working with me and I can see they're just along for the ride and not really here to show up properly, then I'll ask them to leave and make space for somebody else.
The other benefit that I've heard people say is they've learned as much from the curriculum or whatever is being taught or discussed as they have from their peers.
Mm-hmm.
So some people have said things like, I've made some unbelievable connections. There's been businesses that have come out of it, and partnerships, referrals, podcast guests, people co-authored a book together. Heard a lot of just tremendous stories about the benefits of being in a mastermind for a long period of time.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and the longer you stay in a single mastermind with a single coach, mentor, host, whatever you want to call it, the better that relationship will become, the deeper that relationship will become. And I want to give you a hot off the press, quite literally, example for this. I have one member who has been with me for about 5 years. She's amazing. Her name is Jenny Field. She's a communications professional here in the UK. She's a speaker, an author, high-level consultant for B2B industries across niches, you name it, right? And she's been, I mean, when she first joined, she was probably making about a couple of $100K a year. She's now doing 3.5 times that very comfortably. She's cut her working hours right back. And she came to me at the beginning of the year and she said, I think I'm ready to write my next book. I don't want to traditionally publish it because the first time around it was a nightmare. But I don't feel confident enough to self-publish it. Do you know anybody that can help me? And I said, yeah, I know a couple of people, but why don't I just do it for you? Why don't I help you publish it? So we actually gave birth to Upreneur Press, which is our hybrid publishing imprint now. And her new book dropped literally this week. She sold over 3,000 copies in her first week already. And we published the book for her through our new imprint. So that's what 5 years of relationship does for you right there. Like, I actually created a new division of one of my businesses to serve her and now anybody else that's a client that wants to work with me. And quite frankly, I think I'm going to keep it exclusively just for clients. I don't need to become a book publisher. It's too much work. It's way too much work. But if my clients want to publish a book and they don't want to traditionally publish it and they don't feel like doing it on their own, then at least we're there to help them if we can as well. So I believe the longer you stick in any program, as long as you're getting value from it, why would you leave? It's just silly. You don't need to bounce around, looking for one coach after another. The mentor that I have now, I've known for 11 years. We've been working together. So
That's a great story, and that's our endorsement for Mastermind, folks.
Yeah, there you go.
Go join one. Chris, before we wrap things up, let's talk a little bit about Upreneur. You got a great story there. I know it's not your primary business; your daughter runs it now. But tell us a little bit about that story and kind of what that does now.
Yeah, so it was interesting. About 2014, my first book, Virtual Freedom, came out, and at that point, I was really known as like the VA guy. Like you talk about Pat earlier on. He and I connected initially because of VAs, and you know, over the course of sort of 2010 through to 2014, I was really the go-to guy when it came to things like speaking, podcast guests, that kind of thing. Everything to do with virtual assistants. And what had happened was quite differently than expected. I'd built quite a powerful personal brand around that. And at the beginning of 2015, I got an email from somebody saying, I want to build a personal brand. That was the first time. I mean, obviously, I'd heard the phrase, but that was the first time somebody actually said it to me directly in regards to the work that I had already done. And they said, I want to build a personal brand like you. How do I do that? Do you have a course or like a white paper or something? And I was like, never even thought about it like that. And I remember actually being in a mastermind with Pat and John and Amy and two or three other folks at the time, in an in-person kind of peer mastermind. We were all hanging out for the weekend. And I put it forward to them. This is what somebody's come to me with. And it was resounding like, oh, dude, you need to do that. Like you've built this personal, like you absolutely have to capitalize on that. Think about it. And later that year, I remember the day very well. It was July 4th. I was at Pat's house. We had just had a barbecue and a water balloon fight. And we retaliated after getting absolutely hammered by our children and wives, for that matter, as well, actually. Everybody was just bombarding us that day with their water balloons. We retaliated to his home office with a cup of coffee. And that was where the word Upreneur was uttered for the first time.
Cool.
I got the domain name, I got the social handles that afternoon, and that was where it all came about. And over the period of the 9 years that we've had it now up and running, it started off its life as a membership program to help people learn how to do it. It morphed into a course. It's now moved into, coaching cohort groups. We have our incubator. We have our accelerator program as well. And then the top tier of that is my personal roundtable. So everybody that kind of goes through the program can ultimately get to the point of becoming part of that program or that mastermind if they want. But that doesn't mean that we don't obviously take in applications from external people that are showing interest as well. But Upreneur really has become kind of like this big kind of brand where we've done live events and, all this other good stuff as well. And I'm now to the point where it's part of my legacy to hand it off. It's part of my goal to hand it off to Chloe for her to be able to kind of take it in the direction that she wants to take it. I think education will always be a very core component to the Upreneur ecosystem. But I know she's got ideas and they're great ideas for the most part. And so I'm excited to support her in the next 3 to 5 years and watching her build it up before I retire in my mid-50s, which has always been the plan. 55 has always been, the retirement goal. So there you go.
So can a guy like you really, really retire at 55? I mean, you're going to be bored pretty quick, Chris.
I know. My wife says it all the time as well. I see my retirement being nestled into 4 very distinct areas. First and foremost, my art. I'm a very keen watercolor artist. So I really want to paint a lot more than I do. Secondly, bonsai. I'm a big bonsai practitioner and have been for many, many years. I've got about 60 trees on the property here. So I definitely want to be able to spend more time with my baby trees. Obviously my family and travel. And you see how I'm kind of like, leaving the business thing to last because it should be last at this point. I can see myself probably working with maybe half a dozen private clients throughout the course of the year. 70, 80K for the year. Once a month, I jump on and have a call with them. I do 6 calls in one day and, just do everything else all the other days of the month. And that's kind of
That
how I see
sounds
it. So how I see it working.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
can
you
see
know
you
what?
doing some podcasting, some public speaking. You're
Oh
gonna
yeah, oh
get
yeah. The
bored. You're
speaking
gonna
and
get
the
so
books
bored.
thing will always come into play. I have at least 2 or 3 more books in me. I know for sure, and I enjoy being on stage. I enjoy visiting and meeting with people in person as well. So that will certainly continue for a certain period of time. But no, I mean, I when I say retirement, what I genuinely mean in that term is day to day work in the office, servicing clients, servicing businesses, being available fundamentally for work, quote unquote, whatever that might end up looking like. And I see myself sort of wanting to get away from that first and foremost, and really just doing more deep work with a select few individuals more than anything else.
That does sound fun. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, if
Yeah.
that's what retirement
let's
looks
let's
like
do it
for me,
together,
I would
man.
be
Let's do it
happy.
together. Jump on
Yeah.
board.
And we gotta co-author that book on hustle too, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
make
And
hustle a positive
masterminds.
word again. Yeah, I'm a big fan of it, masterminds, for a lot of reasons, as we talked about. Chris, we both got a hard stop at the end of the hour.
Yeah,
But before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find you. And I believe you have a podcast too, right?
I do. So the Upreneur podcast has been going for many years now. We're about to eclipse 11 million downloads, which is insane. But yeah, I mean, you can just search for Upreneur podcast on any of your, Spotify, Apple, whatever. But if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they can just do it at chrisducker.com. I wouldn't be much of a personal brand entrepreneur if I didn't have my own domain name, would I?
And he does respond, folks. I mean, I'm living proof of that. He reached out and responded. So,
There you
Chris,
go.
thank you so much for being on the show. A real joy to have you. It's been a long time of following yours and engaging with your content now. Finally having you on the show. For all the listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Until next time, peace.